Hello and welcome to Art 14. Another big day. Today we are going to be talking about value, all about value. Um, Value is a very important part of drawing, an important part of art in general. Um, it's very important in terms of uh, depicting two-dimensional objects as three-dimensional objects on paper. So let's begin. Bear with me here, folks. All right, value. This is part one. Won't be too long, but there is a lot to go over. Um, all right, value, the effects of light. So value is it's a measure of relative lightness or darkness. Tone is another term used for value. Value scale for grays from dark to light. Low value contrast describes the difference between any two areas next to each other that are slight. An achromatic value scale of gray, the center circles are identical in value. Isn't that kind of crazy? So uh, in another lecture, I'll go over another idea called simultaneous contrast that Joseph Albers kind of talked about. But it's this idea that colors and values can look different when they are placed next to each other. So a green will look, for example, a green will look brighter and more vibrant when placed next to, let's say, like a pink, and that same green will look darker and more toned down placed next to, let's say, like a dark blue. So anyway, I got off track. Um, so yeah, uh, these are all the same grays, but they are just placed next to different values of gray. Kind of cool. So value gradients and scale from white to black. Pay attention to this. We'll be doing a little bit for homework, creating both a scale and a gradient. Um, it's important to know how to make a gradient um, in terms of showing representation and showing lightness and darkness in a drawing. Another kind of scale, a vertical scale, light to dark. We can also kind of think about um, value kind of in terms of like blocking and kind of mapping. So you can kind of see here, this is a graphite drawing done in pencil. But there are certain, areas, right, where it's lighter and darker, and you can kind of divide those up. So let's say this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. An 11 scale value scale. You can identify to your as best you can from 1 to 11 or whatever your scale is. Um, how many values you see in here, right? So like this area would for sure be a 1, right? That's probably, and a 1 over here, the lightest parts of the drawing. But then like the pupil, the dark area, and maybe the lips area, certain parts of the hair are the darkest parts. So that would be on the very end of your other side of the spectrum, so like an 11 per se. So that kind of translates over here, right? Super white, that's, you know, a number 1 here, and you go up to your kind of middle tone grays here, and then your very, very dark gray or black in these areas right here. Squinting to see values in simple shapes. Seeing values is key to drawing in the third dimension. Many artists can visually simplify complex drawing subjects by simply squinting their eyes. We kind of talked about that before, about how closing one eye helps you with perspective, right? Squinting helps you screen out details and see simple values and shapes. So when you see the shapes created by different values, you can draw your subject more accurately. I'll repeat that again. When you see the shapes created by different values, you can draw your subject more accurately. So, like I've kind of been saying before, what we see in front of us, I know we've been drawing a lot with line, and it's great, but actually there really are no hard edge lines in the world around us, right? It's everything's made up of lightness and darkness or value, and so if you kind of see that, if you start seeing the world in terms of lightness and darkness and value instead of lines, you'll get more accurate drawings. Does that make sense? Look at figure 4 and squint your eyes until the image seems to go out of focus. Compare the darkest values to the lightest and try to see the abstract shapes created by the different values. The second drawing shows you what you may see when you squint. Take note of the shapes created by the values. All right, so it kind of, they almost become kind of abstract shapes. But if you squint, you're like, yeah, you start to see, you can definitely start to, you know, pull out different shapes in terms of their value. Kind of cool. Turning colors into values with squinting. Many media, drawing media, such as graphite, are designed for black and white drawings, yet almost everything in the world is in color. You need to adjust your visual perceptions to see these colors as shades of gray when drawing. And I can speak a little bit about that in terms of what's called local color. And that's just a kind of a fancy term for what the color you see in front of you and how that translates to a grayscale into black and white. Because we will be drawing exclusively with charcoal or pencil or ink, all basically black and white grayscale. Nothing is going to be in color. But you know, we need to know what those, you know, colors are in terms of a grayscale. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just simply press a button in the middle of your forehead and magically transform the world from full color to gray values? Its ability would certainly make drawing excuse me, a lot easier. Thankfully, simply squinting your eyes can help you develop this skill. So lighting, the way a subject is lit will affect how it is perceived. Strong light accentuates the contrast of light and dark, but also may flatten forms, and so it can also diffuse lighting softens contours, and so it will bring you kind of subtle gradations. Artificial light allows for more control than natural light. You can't control the sun, but you can control the lamp that is giving you all the shadows. Great example, and we're gonna probably look at this a couple more times, but Edouard Manet, Les Déjeuners sur le Aube. great example of very kind of what we're talking about: high contrast and low contrast, high key, low key. Uh, Lots of contrast happening here, right, between the figures, both with the female figure here, the female figure in the back. Then the background is very dark. The men have very dark clothes on. Really kind of creating that tension there. And if you haven't picked up on this, really creating a a focus, an area for our eyes to go to. So it's not necessarily all about uh, the most kind of happening, most like skilled part of the drawing, technical skilled part of the drawing, or the most interesting part. It's uh, Manet created this area for our eyes to go just through a kind of high contrast, high value area. Variations in light and dark. Value pattern, the arrangement and the amount of change in light and dark. And we're going to go over this quite a few times, but chiaroscuro, the use of light and dark values to imply depth and volume in a two-dimensional work of art. This is a drawing by Georges Seurat, Study for the Model, 1886. Chiaroscuro, Italian for light and shadow. During the Italian Renaissance, this technique was invented to depict the effects of light and shadow in 2D without lines. Values are manipulated for dramatic effects. The preoccupation with form as revealed through light is a Western tradition begun during the Renaissance. Caravaggio, Conversion of St. Paul. Fantastic. The light source is coming from over here. Look at this all these lights and shadows. It's almost like artificial lights coming through here, but it is definitely there was no electricity back then, so it is kind of a made-up light. But Rembrandt, Leçon d'anatomie du docteur, really intense light coming down here. I mean, it's like almost kind of blinding down here on this cadaver. Kind of a gruesome depiction, huh? Value pattern, the arrangement and the amount of change in light and dark. So what would be the value pattern here? How much, lightness and darkness is happening here? There's a lot of darkness, and then definitely some lightness happening here. But, Seurat basically kind of from the get-go decided that the arrangement was going to be very heavy on the dark values and not so much on the light values. Value contrast, the relationship between the areas of dark and light. The average human eye can discern about 40 different variations of value, seeing as differing grays. Yeah. Jan Groover, Untitled. So the relationship between light and dark areas. What is emphasized in each of these images? High key contrast and a low key contrast. What do you guys think? Well, for me, I really think that it's more about what's being emphasized here is, I don't know, in a way I see it as the tears, but also kind of the nostrils. I don't know, a really interesting photograph, but Yeah, a lot of like spherical things happening here. The nostrils and the kind of these like funny teardrops and the ends of the eyelashes. A lot of kind of circles and spheres happening. Pupils. Um, and we can kind of see how, right? High key. Um, if we can go back, let's see. Uh, high key values are everything from the middle, right, to the very lightest. And low key is going to be from the middle to the darkest. And I would say the moon would be kind of the, the thing that I kind of, my eye goes to. And similarly, then if you start to think about that, my eye kind of goes to the pupils and the nostrils because of that really awesome contrast between high key and low key. Uh, Everything here is pretty much very high key, except for the nostrils and the pupils. And then everything in this picture is the middle areas to very dark. But then you kind of get the sky and especially the moon right over the little town is just really stands out because it's the high key surrounded by lots of low key. Um, you know, what value contrast would you describe these two drawings? Um, is which one is high key and which one is low key? This one would be high key contrast and a low key contrast, right? We're dealing with lots of high key values, a lot of light values here, and then very dark values, so low key values here. The relationship between light and dark areas. Consider, study for a moment the value scale of Edward Weston's pepper number 30. Do they run the scale from black to white? Where are the values weighted? Um, and also, what do you guys see when you see this photograph? I would say that yes, it does has a pretty good scale. A lot of highlights right here, and there's highlights here, and there's very dark values here. So yeah, where are the values weighted? Well, definitely we're gonna getting a lot of silhouette happening here around the pepper. So I would say it's kind of weighted on the bottom, kind of in the middle. But also, what do you guys think? What do you see in this? I don't necessarily see pepper. I almost see like a abstract figure in a way. Um, excuse me, or like I don't know, like a bodybuilder like flexing or something. Like, um, that's kind of what I see. All right. So we have also many different ways to create value. Tonal, controlling blends and values. Uh, this is kind of the kind of gradient way, right? We can do hatching and cross hatching. So cross hatching, you cross over lines 1 to 4 directions. Um, and study this because you actually will be doing this for homework. The lines only in one direction for linear. All these create value and will help you with your representational drawing. The relationship between value and color. First thing to know, every color has a value. Pure yellow is a light, high value color. Violet is a dark, low value color. Pure red will fall in the middle of the value scale. So I really like this value scale in terms of thinking about local color. Um, it's really interesting because, as I was saying before, these, if you were to look at this green next to this red and vice versa, right? They all have such different values. I mean, and then, yeah, the more kind of light the kind of color is on the spectrum, the more high key it's going to be. And the more dark it is, like a violet, the more it'll be a low value color. Excuse me. Um, all right. Creating a focal point, value as emphasis. So value can direct the eye, like I was kind of saying before. Features are emphasized by value contrast, value emphasis, use of a light and dark contrast to create a focal point within a composition. Where would you guys say that the focal point is in this drawing? Where? Where? For me, it's going to be kind of this figure, or these four figures, but primarily I kind of think it's this figure. And that's done right through creating that contrast, light and dark contrast. Creates this focal point of this figure right here. Rembrandt, we're definitely getting a lot of focal point and focus right here. This is a very kind of high key area, light and dark contrast, boom, right there. So the representational source we're looking at is a undulating paper, kind of like a ribbon, but the subject is space and light. What kind of value contrast would describe this drawing? Would you say it's more of a low key value contrast or a high key value contrast? Hmm? I would say it's more of a high key value contrast, and it's definitely most of the values are kind of on that um, first half of the spectrum between the lightest and the middle. Uh, but why does it look three-dimensional? We know it's just paper, right? But why does it look like this kind of undulating ribbon? I don't know. Well, I do know. It's because of value and creating that kind of contrast between light and dark. So imagine, right, if there were no shadows cast, we can see the shadow over here. Imagine if this area right here was the same as this area right here in terms of value, or this little, sometimes just like the littlest things can really set your object off and make it so much more three-dimensional than you ever could have imagined. So like this area right here, I would say really makes it three-dimensional. This back area right here, gorgeous, creating that three-dimensionality. This little area right here, showing that there's another side through that paper. Yeah, awesome. Value in space, through the gradations of dark and light, the suggestion of volume or space can be created. Value can impart a three-dimensional quality to shapes, right? So this is why we kind of think about value in terms of creating the illusion of space. I've had you guys, think about how to use perspective and how to use line, and negative space to think about creating space. And now we're going to start to focus on how do we use value to create space. So here is what we have, what's called a value scale. Starting off with the lightest, middle, and then darkest. And then all those actually values on the scale can be seen in this one drawing. Pretty cool, huh? So you've got your, well, you guys can see. But we can break it down right here. So we have the center light really kind of hitting it, your light source right smack on there. And then we've got the highlight, which in, excuse me, most cases will actually just be the plain white of the paper. And you can kind of do that pretty well by using your eraser or chamois cloth to take away value, take away anything you've used pencil on there for. Halftones are very important to kind of establish that that mid-value contrast. Your core shadow is going to be very important as well. Your reflected light, it may not seem super intuitive, but it actually, and you will see it, it is there, and it really sets off that object to make it very much three-dimensional. As well as one of the most biggest parts is the cast shadow, right? It's like, why would a circle create a shadow? Oh yeah, well, it's trying to be a sphere. Value in space. So the classic order of light, we can go from white to black here. And so let's follow through on all these. Number one, the highlight right here, right? The light, the center light, the halo surrounding the highlight. Number two. Number three, the middle light, the local value, right? What are you actually seeing? The dark light, number four here, kind of the middle tones. Number five, you've got your light halftones. Number six, your dark halftones. Number eight, your middle shadow, the bedbug line, the core shadow. Number seven, your reflected light or your light shadow. And number nine, the dark shadow or the cast shadow. But that side view too is pretty cool. All right. So again, we can how we see this is a photograph, but from Ansel Adams, but it still is right creating really nice space. Light tends to get and detail tends to get more blurry and fade as you recede into the distance, and it becomes more sharp and darker in value in the foreground. And that's called atmospheric perspective, the perspective of less distant contours and value contrast as forms recede into the background. Really like this, right? How he's very much another Seurat, dark areas right here. Yeah, and it kind of really gives us, I don't know, very much a mood. It's atmospheric, but also kind of mood spheric. Lighting can form a feeling or sense of space that can cause psychological and emotional weight. James McNeill Whistler, arrangement in gray and black. What do you guys, when you guys look at this painting, what are you thinking of when, you know, what's the emotion and the kind of psychological undertones happening here with this figure? Does this figure look happy? Does this figure look relaxed? To me, not really, because of the value and her, her face and her posture, all of it really kind of signals a sense of anxiousness and waiting or longing, mourning possibly. But it all is, if this, imagine if this painting was done in all high key, all very light values, would not be the same painting, right? Again, we have this kind of ominous, mysterious mood happening with the kind of dark tones and then the light giving us this, is it morning? Is it night? When is it? What's happening? Really cool, huh? So based on the value contrast, how would we describe the emotional content in this photograph by Diane Arbus? Remembering that value can create zones of lightness and darkness. Value can create little difference in spaces such as two or more contrasting parts. But for this, we're definitely looking at kind of the emotional and somewhat kind of atmospheric perspective or value. To me, yeah, this woman is very kind of happy. She seems to not really have a care in the world. Um, and that's, a lot of it is thank to a lot of it is from that kind of very light value, high key value contrast happening here in the atmospheric value. Pretty cool. Huh? All right. And that is it for part one. Stay tuned for part two.